empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? First 6 seconds, point A to point B, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to the Scoop World Order Moving Week edition. It is Masters Week for you golf fans, and for the Buckeye players that are trying to get that starting spot locked up, it is Moving Week. This is a huge week of practice, capped by the biggest scrimmage of the spring, one that is not the spring game. The spring game usually tends to be the worst scrimmage of the spring. A lot of the best players barely play in it, and there's no tackling. But this Saturday, these guys are going to get tuned up, and really this Saturday for these guys, a lot of these guys mentally, it's kind of like it's like when you're on the roller coaster and you're at the top of the hill. After the Saturday, it's like you're coming down the hill, and spring ball is basically over. So these guys got a big week ahead. Super excited about it. We'll be getting some reports in real soon. But in the meantime, as always, we appreciate you guys. Leave us a like, subscribe to the channel, comment on who you think needs to lock down their starting spot this weekend. There's a lot of positions that are wide open. New D coordinator kind of resets everybody on defense, new O-line coach. So it's going to be fascinating to see what we hear. So with that, bring in my good friend Nevadabuck. Nevada, how are you tonight?
Doing great. It's a lot happening around the Ohio State football program. And as you said, huge scrimmage coming up on this weekend. You know, the spring game is kind of the culmination, but like you said, that's more of an exhibition. This weekend's, we're going to find out an awful lot. And I know the Ohio State players are pretty jacked about it.
Yeah, the Saturday scrimmage before the spring game is always good on good. Nobody's generally held out. There might be some guys that are held slightly, like Jackson Smith and Jigba, some guys that are top tier first round guys. But, all the O-linemen are going to be going. Everyone's going to be going for the most part on both sides of the ball. I don't even know if they'll hold Jackson because they need the work. But, when it comes spring game time, you're going to see a lot of the best players. They might do a ceremonial one series and then they put the baseball cap on and enjoy the fanfare. So this is a huge Saturday. Super excited about it, but had a little bit of movement on the roster yesterday. So we're going to get right into the show. Scoop Order show. And Legend Cavazos is gone. Bryson Shaw is gone. Nevada, what are your initial thoughts when we lost 2 DBs in one day to the transfer portal?
Well, I think that speaks as much to the progress of some other people as it does to anything against those guys. I think the transfer portal era has kind of changed things for players. If you're getting passed up on the depth chart, then, we most used to talk about things like pair and a spare and wait your time and building depth. And those things are gone now. And it's like kids want to play. Kids have an opportunity to go and play, other places. And, it's really difficult, with the ease of the transfer portal to keep kids around. And so I just, I wish both kids well. We hadn't seen much from a Legend, but he'd shown some promise, and Bryson, played well for us last year. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was not bad at all, and certainly was an early contributor and a guy that I thought could be a good player here at Ohio State, but he felt he had better options elsewhere. And like I said, we wish him well and hope for the guys that are ahead of them depth chart to step even further up and make a big impact.
Yeah, and anytime there's that wholesale change in the coaching staff where you have a new coordinator, new position coach, sometimes there's guys that are used to being either a starter or being higher up on the depth chart, and the old staff viewed him in a much different light than the new staff does, and I think that was the case with Bryson Shaw. Obviously, had a huge pick against Michigan. It didn't make much of a difference. We still got ran in that game, but he's a kid that has tape. Started for a team that won the Rose Bowl last year. And, he gets panned by a lot of fans, but, he beat out all the guys behind him. They weren't just playing him to play him. I mean, he beat out guys that were maybe more heralded, maybe had higher star rankings, but he was the guy the coaches went with. And so that's speaks volumes that he grabbed the job and he did the best he could. Was he Malik Hooker? No. But, he did the best he could on what ended up being a not so great Ohio State defense. But I think that, in the new age of the transfer portal, and I'm going to throw this right back to you, Nevada, what is good depth? Because, people talk all the time about depth at certain positions, depth at quarterback, depth at the offensive line. Is that possible now at positions like that?
Well, I think you bring up a good point. I think it's position by position. I think positions like quarterback, where you play one, or offensive line, where generally, only a starting unit of 5 goes, and after that, you're not really seeing a lot of substitution. I think it's going to be tough to build good depth. I think you're going to have to be satisfied with adequate depth, and maybe some guys that are either really young or that are just content with being there and developing, but being ready in case there's some sort of emergency. But I don't know if you're ever going to have the days of, great, 4 great quarterbacks in the room anymore, or, 10, 12 deep on the offensive line. I think guys like the Ryan Jacobys or the Max Rays of the world they're going to move on and say, hey, I can go start at Colorado. Hey, I can go start at Pittsburgh. Why sit here at Ohio State and not play? Or Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow would be selling cars in Athens, Ohio right now if he hadn't transferred to LSU. Instead, he's maybe the face of the NFL, certainly the future face of the NFL. So I don't fault any of these kids for transferring. I totally understand, and I think it's going to be position by position. And I think for fans, we're just going to have to accept the reality of that things are different and things are profoundly different, and we're just going to have to get used to that.
Yeah, and it's wild to think that 1 year ago at this time, Jamison Williams was on the Ohio State Buckeyes, and he was our number 3 wide receiver, and Jackson Smith-Njigba was kind of nipping at his heels, and he was the number 4 guy. And then, right after spring ball, JMO enters the portal, goes to Bama, had just an absolutely fantastic consensus All-American season, should have won the Blitnikoff, and that's just how it's going to be now. Like, that's why I mean, recruiting obviously is important, but to me, it's never meant less until they lock down the transfer portal and they put some sort of restriction on it where you can only leave during certain periods. You can only leave after 1 year or 2 years. It's going to be insane. Like when a guy like Quinn Ewers, who's the number 1 player in the entire country, the highest rated prospect of all time, leaves after 3 months. I mean, it's insane because for some of these kids, especially the quarterbacks at that position, there is so much money at stake in terms of NIL and even more so NFL. I mean, NIL is a pittance compared to what these quarterbacks are making in the NFL now. And you only make it to the NFL if you play. As you said, Joe Burrow, if he sticks it out and he's Mr. Buckeye and he plays 5 years and runs out of the tunnel on senior day and waves his hand, like, he's selling, cars or insurance or something. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, he's not going to be a $60 million a year quarterback like he's going to be with the Bengals. So you got to go play. You got to put out tape. If you ran college football, what would you do to change the way the portal is now?
Well, I think you just said you'd put some periods in place, or or make it a one-time type of transfer type of deal, or put some sort of restriction on it. But right now, what you basically have is you have the NFL with everybody's a free agent. Like I'd say 1 year contracts. They're not even 1 year contracts. They're like 1 day contracts, and you can go anywhere, anytime, any place, and it's just craziness. And I don't even think we've even scratched the surface, because once these these NIL foundations and groups really get activated at these other universities, where they're starting to poach players that are fringe players or even starters. I mean, look what happened with the NCAA basketball. You make a great run to the Elite Eight, and then all of a sudden, boom, group of those players are leaving, and what they're gonna get bought and sold and go somewhere else. And maybe that's great. I don't know. As a fan, I don't think it's great, but it's the reality of where we are in 2022, and like I said, we're all going to have to adjust to it.
Yeah, and I think that the big fish are just going to keep beating the little fish, and I was worried about that. I've said it many times. If you're Jackson Smith-Njigba and you're CJ Stroud, and you look at each other and say, "Wow, we just had the greatest Rose Bowl performance as a duo of all time. Maybe we should go hit the portal. Let's go hit the portal and see what the market is." And then, some oil magnate at some school says, "Hey, I'll pay you guys $10 million to play next year, your senior year or your junior year before you go pro down here, wherever, Texas, College Station, Bama, Miami." Like, I mean, people think that's crazy, but it's not crazy. And I'm telling you, like, the fact that it's happening in the basketball tournament, and you'll get these guys that are, I mean, what are the odds that a kid like Steph Curry, who blew up in the tournament his junior year, they went on that run with Davidson, would have stayed at Davidson? I mean, he would have been playing at Duke or Kentucky or UCLA or one of the powerhouses. After these small schools that make these runs, it's going to be a double-edged sword, because the stars that are carrying them, if they've got eligibility, they're going to hit the portal. And I just think that there could be underclassmen in the future that have big bowl games or big seasons, and they're at a smaller school, or they're at a school that, hell, even if they're at Ohio State, I mean, why not have free agency? I mean, it'd be like if you offered NFL superstars or NBA superstars that they could have free agency every year, would they do it? If it was their decision, yeah, absolutely they would. Because then it's the highest bidder, and I don't know. I think that there's got to be something to lock it down and make it a little more formal and a little less knee jerk. Because I think some of these kids make terrible decisions. I'm not saying necessarily Legend or Bryson Shaw made terrible decisions, but I just think you look at the portal, and when the music stops, there's a lot of kids without homes. They don't finish their degrees. They're just working out at the gym, hoping for a shot. And I think it's terrible. And I think a lot of these kids get bad advice from handlers or agents or whoever. And they need to put some restrictions in that. You got any final thoughts on this one, Nevada? Because we could go on this one for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's going to be, Ohio State needs to use the transfer portal as an offensive weapon. They've done it selectively. Obviously most notably with Justin Fields or Jonah Jackson, but I think they've got to be even more aggressive in the transfer portal. They're going to compete going forward big time. I don't think they're aggressive enough, and I think it's gonna hurt them. But I understand it's hard to do that because you don't want to mess with your culture at the same time. But I think Ohio State's going to have to get more aggressive, and I think they will.
Yeah, I totally agree. So. This kind of came to my mind, DBU, because Malcolm Jenkins, one of my former teammates, a guy that was a captain with me in 2007, retired. 13-year career across multiple teams, outstanding leader, great friend, great teammate, ferocious competitor, a guy that I loved, listened to his speeches before games, just a kid that I always respected, always revered. Malcolm, he's a big part of DBU, but let's talk a little bit about DBU. It's not often that you could lose a starting safety to the portal, and then a middle of his career depth guy in the portal, and not be worried at all. But how are you feeling about Ohio State? They call it BIA, DBU, Best in America, Defensive Back University. How are you feeling about the depth right now across the board in the defensive backfield?
Well, I'm actually feeling good. Jordan Hancock has really been a player that's been coming along really well. Tanner Mcallister, some people had written that they thought that Tanner Mcallister wouldn't play here or he couldn't play, and I think that was kind of not really serious because he's terrific, and I think it's a testament to how well the Ohio State coaches feel about him. That some of these other guys have moved on. Also, we've got to forget, Josh Proctor's coming back from injury. And, Josh was a huge part of the defense, especially in a Knowles defense. So, then you throw in, Ronnie Hickman or Court Williams. I mean, you've got guys that can play across the board. So I think we're young. We've got some guys coming off injury. We got some guys coming back that are, with some experience. But I think we're going to be extremely talented in the defensive backfield and more active in the defensive backfield than we've ever been. So I'm really optimistic about the group.
Yeah, and I think, Denzel Burke obviously is a guy who's a headliner. He's a guy that really, even in the loss to Oregon and some of our lower moments, he really played fantastic football, super competitive, doesn't act his age. Reminds me, honestly, a lot of Malcolm, because Malcolm in 05 was a true freshman in a huddle with A.J. Hawk and Dante Whitner and some serious dudes, some really good dudes, and Malcolm fit right in. He fit like he was a 28-year-old NFL veteran when he was an 18-year-old in the first huddle as our nickel. So I think DBU is coming along. I think that Jim Knowles having his focus in that back seven to help coordinate the passing defense is going to be a huge upgrade. I think Tim Walton does fantastic work. Anytime Jalen Ramsey says that he's the best cornerbacks coach he's ever had, you take note of that. Obviously Perry Eliano, did numbers last year with Sauce Gardner and with Kobe Bryant, a Thorpe Award winner and probably a top 5 to 10 pick in the NFL draft in Sauce. And I'm just excited to see what they do with Ohio State talent, to be honest with you. I know it's kind of one of those weird things where we basically traded Perry Eliano for Kerry Combs, and Kerry Combs was a fan favorite. He's a guy who's a favorite on the Buckeye Cruise. He's done a lot for the program. Being a coordinator didn't work out for him, but it's kind of going to be interesting to see how his corners contrast with the corner play up here. Right down the road between the two schools, and basically switch two coaches. So that'll be fascinating. You got any final thoughts on the DBs, Nevada?
No, I just remember what Jim Knowles did with Jeremy Cash. Ohio, a guy who moved from Ohio State to Duke and went on to great things there. And I think Knowles is going to make a world of difference for these talented Ohio State defensive backs. And I think we're going to see the benefit of that on the field. And I can't wait.
Yeah, Jeremy Cash was the guy that was openly made fun of by the new staff, and honestly, I was completely understanding of that because he didn't really show much in his 1 year there in 2011, and then he goes to Duke, and most of us thought we'd never hear from him again, and he ends up being the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, All ACC multiple times. I think he got some All American honors. So when you do that at Duke, you got to have a guy who's putting you in the right position. They kind of played him as like a linebacker hybrid guy that would blitz and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And he put up massive stats. So, so now we're on to Larry Johnson's Rushmen. So the Rushmen had kind of an up and down year last year. I'd say mostly down. There was a lot of hype going into the season just because we had some 5-star freshmen, including JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer. We thought potentially one or both of those guys would end up starting. JT turned out to start more than Jack did, play more than Jack did. We have some really good young blood. There's kind of a super sophomore class with Mike Hall and Tylik Williams between the four of those guys. And we have an older crew, some guys that maybe haven't lived up to the hype as much as people projected, some guys that have a lot of talent, and it's kind of their last turn to make an impression on NFL scouts. So Nevada, talk a little bit about the state of the Rushmen right now, the perceived depth, and what you expect out of this unit, for the next 2 weeks of spring ball.
Well, what's interesting is, we've touched on this on one of the last podcasts that we did is, using these hockey lines to change, groups and en masse out there where they've kind of got the older guys going and then they've got the younger guy group. And I found that to be really interesting. And it's really been kind of motivating the guys. You've got guys like Zach Harrison who, every year we kind of wait for Zach to fulfill all that tremendous athletic potential that he has. And, for me, he's been a little bit of a disappointment. He plays a little stiff. He plays a little high. Every now and then on flash, make a great play. But I think he's got other levels, beyond what we've seen so far. And, I think he's the kind of one of the key to the veteran Rushman group right there, because the young guys are pushing him. You mentioned the Michael Halls and the Tylik Williams and the JTs and the Jack Sawyers and those guys. But, we got to get some production out of the older guys as well. And I think one of the things that's going to really pay dividends is I think last year there was a lot of friction between the defensive line group and the linebacker group. And this year they're going to be coached as one cohesive unit. And I think that's going to make all the difference in the world. It's going to make a difference in our discipline. It's going to make a difference in how we approach the games. And more importantly, it's just going to make a difference in terms of our coordination. So, I'm expecting big things out of the Rushmen. They've been, like you said, they were down last year. They were a little bit of a disappointment. I expect that to blip back up this year.
Yeah, and I'm always a big fan of your defensive coordinator coaching linebackers, because when you're coaching linebackers, you have to coordinate with the front end and the back end. If you're just coaching in the secondary like Kerry Combs was, or you're coaching up front, it's not as cohesive as a unit. You're not around both sides of the ball. When you're coaching linebackers, you go to inside run drill. You also go to 7-on-7 drill. So you're in all of the major drills where you have to coordinate run fits, passing drops, the whole thing. And I think that's going to be really important. I think Jim Knowles is fantastic at that. And something that I think is really underrated, and I've said this multiple times, is he brought like 5 young coaches, 5 quality control guys, 5. They kind of flushed out the whole quality control realm too, and brought in all Oklahoma State and Duke guys that were Jim Knowles guys. So you've got kind of like every position coach kind of has a tutor, so to speak, with him to make sure things are going the right way, the right language, right coaching, guys that really know Jim Knowles' system. I think that is a huge, huge value add that not enough people talk about. Frankly, not enough people know about, because they've never really been in the inner workings of a coaching room and how, when you've got 50 guys on defense and you've got, 4 or 5 coaches, you need some extra people to assist and develop some of the young guys, because sometimes you can't watch everything as the full-time guy. But I think that, getting some interior pass rush is just something that we just have to get going. And hopefully it's Ty Lake. Hopefully it's Mike Hall. We just have to affect the quarterback more than we did last year. There were too many games where quarterbacks were basically unpressured, and it was it's hard because with our offense being as explosive as it is, and the amount of time that we are going to have the lead in games, it should be sack fest city, just because you've got all these guys that are ready to go. So but I think that's going to be a huge key to the defense, is getting pressure from our ends. I do think Jack Sawyer ends up starting this year. I think that he's been fantastic in the spring. He's playing with more confidence. He's much bigger, so he's not getting bounced around the way that he needs to, or he was last year, excuse me. And I think that you need that physicality and that burst off the edge. And I think Zach Harrison, I know he has the ability. I know he has the speed. But, pass rush is just as much about technique, feel, slipperiness, so to speak, as it is about speed. People think that if you run fast, you can run in a straight line, you can be a great pass rusher. That helps. But, there's a lot of guys that run 4.6, 4.7 that can get to the quarterback better than guys that run 4.4, which doesn't, is very counterintuitive. But to me, hopefully he can get that tuned up a little bit. So just to finish this thing out. So this is kind of, I'm just going to put you in the mindset of a current player on Ohio State's team. So this is the definition of like hump week. Your body feels terrible. They had a big scrimmage on Saturday. You got a handful of practices left. This Saturday generally is a pretty good knockdown, drag out scrimmage. And I think that these guys are really going to get after it. And that's just part of the gig. I mean, you want to win that spot. You want to win the starting gig. You got to go perform in the scrimmage. You know that it's going to be good on good. Back when I played with Jim Tressel, we used to have what we called the jersey scrimmage. And there would be a kind of a funky point system where, the defense would get points for sacks and forced fumbles and touchdowns and, stopping a team before they could get a first down. They get like 1 or 2 points. It was a real funky scoring system, but Truss would always rig it up so it would be close, so to speak, up to the end, and then it would always be like the first O versus the first D, within a couple points, and you always want to make it competitive at the end. So it is going to be it was always a big day. The winner in the point system would have the honor of wearing the scarlet jersey. So that was something that was really cool with Tress. When we always wanted the scarlet jerseys, we didn't want to be wearing the white jerseys, which I don't even know if they think about that anymore. But that was always a really cool deal. And I think that this Saturday, this is like a game. This is like a game for a lot of these guys. You gotta bring it. And really, like, for some of these guys, if you're Paris Johnson or DeWand and you got to go see Jack Sawyer, Zach Harrison, JT Tuimoloau, like, you got to show up every day like it's a game, or else you're going to get embarrassed. So these guys, it's iron sharpens iron. I think that we're getting much better day by day. I think Donovan Jackson is going to be a fantastic left guard. I basically could write his name in for the Notre Dame game. Luke Whippler, leader of the offensive line room. He's the guy that runs the show, makes the calls, knows the offense better than anybody. Super excited to see him. And, and then you get the Jones brothers on the right with Matt Jones and DeWan. So I'm excited to hear about how these guys do in this next scrimmage. I've been there. I know that it's tough once you get to the 2s and 3s, especially when you got a bunch of beat up O linemen, to keep a cohesive line together and keep things structured. But our skill guys can bail them out because we've got some tremendous skill. And, with a couple guys transferring out of the DB room, there's going to be some young DBs that are going to be back there, playing a little higher than maybe they expected. Maybe a Kai Stokes is going to get some more reps a little higher up, maybe with the 2s. And some of these guys are going to be getting bumped up. Some guys just took off. So anytime a guy leaves in a transfer portal, there's opportunity for the guys behind him. So it's going to be exciting to see who moves up this week, who makes a move. I'm just so excited. I love talking about, inside information. I love talking about practice reports, what we're hearing. It's a blast. And if you enjoy doing this all the time, thank you so much. We actually have got the site for you. So BuckeyeScoop.com is our website. It is our membership page, and we really have a blast on here because, we talk football, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also talk, we're talking Masters, we're talking vacations, we're talking, we had a great March Madness thread, so whatever's going on, whatever's hot in the world right now, we're talking about it. It's a blast to be a part of the community. It's an epic community. We love being a part of it. I would love for you to join us on BuckeyeScoop.com. Again, we're the largest Ohio State community in existence, so we would love to add you to that as well. So if you enjoyed this, leave me a like if you're feeling fancy. Love to see you comment. Who do you think will make their move this week? Who's going to make their move, clinch their starting spot this week in practice? We're going to have reports going up basically every day. Who's making their move? So let us know in the comments. We appreciate you. Thank you, Buckeye Nation, for all your support. As always, go Bucks.